objective is to look at the importance of having a China business plan, choosing the right business activity, having the right company name right from the get-go. There are 2 points that we're going to follow in today's agenda. One is the importance of having this business plan, and the second one is how you can actually create a specific business plan for the Chinese market. Next slide. So why is it important to create a business plan? Now, I know that when someone is starting up a business in China, the last thing that they want to do after having done numerous trips to the market for exploration reasons is to sit down and draft a 20 to 100 page document in relation to the business plan. I think first off, we've got to realize that it doesn't have to be a Word document. It certainly doesn't have to be 100 pages. Creating a brief business plan on PowerPoint is perfectly acceptable. The reason you should create it, however, is that you want to be able to understand what you're going to do both in the short and long term within your China journey. So I always say that when a company is coming into the Chinese market, they're on a journey. You've got the startup phase, you've got the break-even point, and then hopefully, if everything is going well, you've got the successful point of profitability. In some other cases, you will have the point of having to determine whether you want to exit the market or not. By having your business plan in place and also having a budget in place, it allows you to manage the growth of your business. It helps you to have a vision. If you are looking for financing, whether it's from Chinese investors or whether it's from overseas investors, it helps you to attract financing because you certainly have to provide a piece of document to attract your investors. And most importantly, it helps you to manage your staff's expectations, whether that's from senior management all the way down to mid-management to junior management. Your staff want to know that there's a vision for your company. How is it going to grow? Because the key thing is you want to make sure that you maintain them for the length of your business. Next slide. So I've just listed a few reasons here of why I think it's critical to establish your business plan. One, it clarifies direction. So having just a simple description of your business, its products or its services, perhaps even, who are your ideal customers? How are you going to service the client, or where are you going to get your products from? Are you importing? Just outlining the workflow and an operational workflow within your entity. Clarifying this direction will give you purpose. It will help you to understand how to move forward within your entity. The next is future vision. You've got to set yourself goals. You've got to understand what are your objectives by establishing this business. It's not just profitability. You've got to understand when you're going to break even, when you're going to become profitable, and how are you going to get there. It allows you to attract and secure financing. Like I said, you've got to show a piece of paper to investors to highlight what your vision is. What entity are you setting up? How are you going to set it up? How are you going to, if they finance it, what is the money going to be used for, etc. It also helps to attract team members, executives, third-party providers. You don't necessarily have to show these people a piece of document, but you have to give them the vision. When I talk to a lot of companies that are new to the Chinese market, and I say to them, what is your objective? What is your goal in the Chinese market? It's a lot of flustering. They can't come out with a clear thought on how they're going to build up their business in China. Putting that thought down on paper gives you direction and helps you to explain to service providers, even like myself, what is your vision, so that we can help you to get there as well. It helps you to manage your company. It helps you to build an organizational structure in terms of titles of directors, officers, it helps you to build a hierarchy in terms of staff. And ultimately, it is a management tool that should be used to help you have sales targets, operational milestones, meeting goals, etc. It should also help you to maintain focus. And this is something that I find absolutely critical, because most people will think, okay, well, I'll create a business plan, I'll get my investors, and then I'm going to put basically this document into a drawer and never look at it again. You shouldn't be doing that. And I'll be reiterating that throughout today's presentation. Your business plan should be something you update, whether it's monthly, quarterly, biannually, to get new investors, but also to keep you on a focus, to keep you on the right path for your vision of growth within your organization. And ultimately, it should help you to fuel ambitions. You know, basically, you want to get your dream off the ground, and you need support from team members, from investors to help you follow that ambition. So it should give you, this document should be able to give you confidence that you need in order to build up your business in China. Next slide. I get a lot of questions in terms of, do you have a business plan template? I don't have a business plan template because ultimately, like I said, if you are as lazy as I am in terms of creating business plans and having Word documents, I don't do that myself. I create a PowerPoint presentation, and I have certain key chapters that I want to include within that presentation to show my investors and to show the management team. So one is just having an executive summary, a snapshot of what your business is. Then having a company description. Generally, that's something you're going to put on your website in any case. You should have a market analysis. You should be doing your research and understanding what is your industry like in China? What is your market like? What market share are you going to have? Who are your competitors? What are your competitors doing? You should have some form of research available. Put it down on paper so that you can analyze, what's going to be different by you going into the market. You should have an organization and management structure. You should highlight your services or products. You should definitely have a marketing and sales strategy plan. How are we going to be marketing my services or my products? What are my sales channels? This should all be highlighted. And again, bullet points is perfectly acceptable, but to put it down on paper so that you've really analyzed everything helps tremendously. Funding requests, this is all associated with developing a budget. How much money do you need? How much money should you be asking for within the next 3 to 5 years? And you should have financial projections readily available. And I can trust you, investors will be asking for all of this. In the appendix, you should have things that I'm probably going to mention today, like how are you going to create your business activity? How are you going to think of a Chinese company name? And there's so many other aspects that probably should go into the appendix as well. Next slide. Now, I've said I was going to reiterate this throughout the presentation, so here's the first slide where I'm emphasizing it. Business planning is the most effective when it's an ongoing process, meaning update your PowerPoint presentations or your Word documents. Make sure that you do this often enough that you can react to events react to events that you can foresee versus reacting to events that have already happened. Because if you are slow to react, this will impact your business and might even cause you to have to exit the market, right? If you're able to update your business plan and foresee things that are going to pop up and then helps you to adapt your business plan in all different aspects from organizational structure to management. One perfect example for this was I had a client many years ago who had a 20-person office, sales office in China. The general manager was basically just overhiring, and in the end, they had to fire the general manager, which completely impacted their whole business. And they had to reevaluate their structure, their organizational structure, and ultimately they had to reevaluate whether they were going to stay in the market or not. So being able to update things frequently enough and getting updates from your China team frequently enough so you know how the business is being developed is critical. Next slide. So as I mentioned with this one case study, here they had actually organizational issues. They were overhiring. The GM was causing too much headcount budget going into things versus focusing on other types of marketing. So, what you need to do is make sure you amend, add, and remove chapters and clauses within your business plan. When you start off, I can tell you already, within the first 6 months, you're going to have to adapt your business plan. Within the first year, you're going to have to adapt your business plan. Why? Because China is prone to causing obstacles, challenges. It will affect your timelines that you create. So many things can happen. I just have had a client these last couple of weeks that delayed the process of sending documentation, which is causing now the delay for the incorporation of their company, which will affect their timeline in the long run, and affect a lot of operational issues in the long run in terms of hiring staff, in terms of getting up and running with signing contracts. So being able to have a business plan and understanding that whenever there is an obstacle or a challenge or a problem, you can always update it, right? You may need to update key performance indicators. You may have to update your objectives and goals. You may find that the market changes in the first year of operation, which means you've got to make changes to market trends, market analysis, customers, competitors. You may find that you've got to fire people sooner than expected, and you're going to have high turnovers initially. That will affect your operational organization. So here I've kind of issues that do arise with companies when they start off in their first year and how they then have to adapt their business plans. Next slide. So I just wanted to highlight here, 7 tips to write a perfect business plan. The first is research. Don't start writing a business plan until you've done your market research in the Chinese market, right? You've got to understand exactly everything about your business in China. You've got to understand who your audience is. You've got to understand who your competitors are. You have to do the market research in order to understand how you're going to create your company and what type of company you're going to create. It's critical to do your research. You've got to determine the purpose of your plan. It's like a roadmap, right? You've got to create this roadmap that provides direction so that your business can plan its future and potentially avoid bumps. Now, this is very optimistic of me because quite frankly, in China, you're always going to hit bumps and obstacles along the way. It's sort of something that you can't avoid. But at least by creating this roadmap, you know what direction you want to go into, and it might even help you to find solutions once you hit the roadmaps. Think also of creating plan Bs, backup plans. If something were to occur, how would you create a new solution or a new roadmap? This is particularly important if you're getting financing as well. You want to create a company profile. And like I said, you're going to use this company profile on your website because you want to use it to attract customers. You want to use it to attract talent. It's important for you to have a company profile so that you know exactly what type of business you're creating. You've got to document all aspects of your business. And this is particularly critical when you are trying to get financing or you're trying to get investors. Investors want to know everything, and they have absolutely the right to want to know everything. They are giving you their money to set up a business in China. And if you are working for a corporate organization, your finance department, your CFO, your global CFO, he's going to be giving you the money to set up the business in China. And he will want to know every single aspect of what is happening in the market. So it's important that you document everything, right? All the different stages, all the problems, all the solutions, etc. You definitely need a strategic marketing plan. And this is particularly important for the Chinese market, where you should not be taking what you're doing abroad and just putting it into the Chinese market. It doesn't work like that. The Chinese marketing strategies are very different, particularly with social media, with e-commerce, with retail, with B2B sales. So make sure you do create a strategic marketing plan. The next is you've got to make sure that the business plan you create is adaptable to your audience. So if, for example, you've got bankers, you've got investors, you've got employees, you're not going to show all of these people this one PowerPoint presentation. The bankers are going to want to look at the financing aspects, so they're going to want to look at balance sheets, cash flow statements. Your finance team is going to want to look at the same things. Investors will want to have a general overview of the progress of the company, what's happening. They also don't want to look through the detailed financial management reports. They just want to know, are we going in the right direction? Are we not? If we're not, How are you changing that? Employees, this is something that I do want to emphasize quite a bit. If you're setting up a business in China and you're hiring people, you've got to be able to, first of all, build trust and loyalty within your staff. So you may not want to reveal all aspects of your business plan. The business plan is your intellectual property because you're creating the business. It's your ideas or it's your team's ideas. So you don't want somebody to copycat that. So you do also want to be a bit strategic on how you are telling your employees your vision. And you may not want to go into too much detail initially, right? Because you do want to build up trust and loyalty. And you got to talk to people about why you care. I had a UK client right now that it took him 1 year to get the green light to move forward with establishing an entity in China. And it was 1 year of back and forths, of questions from the board of directors, from questions from the finance department. There was so much back and forth and information that had to be passed along until finally the business plan that he showed them, which included everything, including exit strategies from the market, because he wanted to make sure that they knew everything about the startup, the potential of eventually liquidating, everything. And it took him 1 year to get the green light. So that's just to show you that even for a UK company, for one person who's in charge of the Chinese market, who's sitting in the UK, it did take him 1 year to develop a business plan and get the green light for this business plan to actually be approved to move forward with actually establishing an entity in China. Next slide. So when you're creating your business plan and you're looking specifically at the Chinese market, here are a list of 16 things that you need to think about. And we're not going to go through these 16 things in today's presentation. We're just going to be looking at 2 of these things. But here's a list of 16 things or 16 chapters that you definitely want to include in your business plan solely related to China. All right. The first is developing your structural plan. What type of company do I need? Rep office, limited company, joint venture. You've got to look at 3 very important aspects when going into China: your liability, the flexibility of your structure, and the marketability of your structure. A lot of things in China are related to the image that you're portraying in the market. The 5th aspect is the business scope that we're going to look at in greater detail. The registered office address, because this is a criteria that you must have. You have to choose city, a district. Your Chinese company name, and again, we'll go into greater detail on that aspect today. Next slide. You've got to look at the financing aspect, looking at the total investment, registered capital. That's why it's important to have a budget. Looking at who's going to be the shareholder of that entity. Is it going to be an individual? Is it going to be a holding company? Is it going to be the main operational company in the UK, for example? Who's going to be the authorized signer for everything to do with the investment in China? So who's going to be authorized signer on behalf of the shareholder? What type of corporate structure are you going to be establishing in terms of board of directors, executive director, legal rep, general manager, supervisor? What are you going to look at in terms of human resources? What are you going to be able to outsource so that you don't have to hire? And what do you need to hire in order to fulfill all the objectives you want to have in the market? And looking at all the ongoing operational costs. So looking at basically your operational workflow and how much is that going to cost you in the long run. So 16 chapters purely related to China needs to go into your China business plan. Basically, you could have a presentation and information gathering for every single line item. There's a lot of information out there, but these 16 points should really be in your China business plan. Next slide. So the first thing we're going to look at today is the business scope. So when you're creating your business plan, the key thing is understanding what can you do in the Chinese market? Because quite frankly, there's no point creating a business plan if you realize you can't actually physically establish an entity in China, or you can't physically do the business you want to do in China. So the first thing that you've got to look at is understanding China's business licenses and activities. And the first step in terms of doing that is looking at the negative list catalog. So probably a lot of you are aware that as of January 1st, there's a new foreign investment law that's come out in China. There's a lot of information within that new investment law, but pertaining to this presentation, let's look at the negative list. For those of you that don't know, the negative list is basically a list of sectors and industries that are either restricted or prohibited in China, meaning that a foreign investor cannot, if their sector industry is in this list, they cannot set up by themselves in the Chinese market. Either if it's completely prohibited, absolutely no way. If it's restricted, they will need a joint venture partner. So the first step is looking at this negative list to understand, is your industry and sector and what you're looking to do in that list? If so, we're going to have to evaluate a completely different strategy in terms of finding a joint venture partner or finding some form of partner that can assist us into getting into the market. For example, a distributor or an agent that has the license to do this type of work. You've got to understand whether you are, so basically the Chinese government makes it pretty simple for you. You've got to understand whether you are a service-oriented company, whether you are a trading company, and if you are trading, is it import and export from China, or is it domestic purchase and sales? Then you've got to think, are you manufacturing in any shape or form? Are you doing any form of pick and pack, assembly, and actual production? Once you have an understanding of what you're, there's so many other categories too. There's even research and development, innovation. So you've really got to look at what you're doing. I mean, that's probably the first umbrella of activities you've got to look at to understand what do you want to do in the market. So it is very critical to look at all of these things. And then obviously, the next step is drafting this business scope. So here, next slide, I'd like to give you some tips on how to draft your business scope. The first is research. Now, I think this is really interesting because a lot of people haven't thought about doing this, is you can go on the COC website and you can research your competitors. And the information that you get out of the COC website is basically everything that is on the business license of your competitors. So everything from their investment capital to their business scope to who is the legal representative to how long their term of validity is from the entity. By researching what your competitors are already doing in the Chinese market allows you to see their business scope, and it allows you to see what they are permitted to doing in the Chinese market. Now, we all know that what you see from your competitors in terms of website information, in terms of just understanding what customers are saying, might not actually reflect what is in your business scope, i.e. they may be doing some form of services or selling doing some type of activity that is not permitted. So it gives you a lot of insight into how your competitors have actually registered their businesses and what they are actually doing outside of that, if anything at all. And this is a first step for you to actually draft your business scope. Now, if you have no competitors in the market, which is really hard to imagine because I'm sure that there are a lot of Chinese companies that are established in the market that are doing similar activities, use those use those companies as a starting point to draft what you want to do. Take a paper and write all the activities that you want to do, that you want to perform, both now, so you should have 3 columns, now, in 5 years, and in 10 years. Because the goal is that you want to have as broad of a business scope as possible so that you don't have to make changes down the line. And last but not least, you've got to be prepared that when you submit your application to the COC, that they amend, adapt, downsize your original scope. Now, this can either be taken positively, meaning that you've got a much more compact and succinct business scope, or it could mean that they've taken certain things out, meaning you're not allowed to do them in the Chinese market because you're a foreign entity, and therefore for those certain activities, you may have to find other solutions. You've also got to understand that in certain industries, you need to have additional licensing. So for example, if you want to go into e-commerce and you add e-commerce into your business scope, you have to be prepared that you apply for an ICP license, either an ICP registration or an ICP license immediately following the issuance of your business license. Next slide. So the next topic we're going to touch on today is the Chinese company name. Now, this is something, or let me add it in a phrase, in the words of Shakespeare, what's in a name? Well, when it comes to business in China, a name is really critical. It's an image aspect, right? The name, the Chinese name of your company can impact the talent that you're looking to hire. It can impact your customers. It can impact what the suppliers think about you. There's a lot in a Chinese name. And the issue in China is that when you register your company, only the Chinese name is registered. So the biggest question that you've got to ask yourself is, how important is the Chinese name to the image of the company and to our marketing and sales strategy? So this is why I've put in a whole section in the business plan, a whole chapter on marketing and sales. Is it okay for you to market just with your English name? Or is it vital for you to have a great Chinese name that will impact your business and that you will use as a branding tool? Next slide. So let's look at how you can create your Chinese name. So the first point is the Chinese language is the only name that's registered. As a foreign invested company, there is a format of how your Chinese name will look like. You will have the company name, you will have the business type, which is why it's so critical to understand what your business scope is going to be, the city of formation, and then company limited. So let's say you're going to have your company name as XYZ or ABC. Usually it's between 2 and 4 Chinese characters. Business type can be anything from management consulting to trading to engineering to manufacturing. There's plenty more as well. To the city of formation, where are you establishing your company? Which is why I also had a whole chapter in there about finding your registered office address, because the city will be included. Shanghai, for example, Beijing, Wuxi, Wuhan will be included in the name, and then company limited. Next slide. Now here come the tricky parts. The Chinese company name, so these 2 to 4 characters that you have to create, have to be or must be different from any other company registered in that same business within that same city. So if there is another company with even a similar pronunciation of characters, that name will be rejected. And obviously it is often very surprising, but it's a fact that there are a lot of good names that are already taken and that are reserved, which is why when we do company establishments or company incorporations, we usually ask clients to provide us at least between 5 to 10 alternative names so that we don't waste time in the company name application process. So I can give you worst case scenarios. We've had companies who have appointed feng shui masters to help come up with names. We've had clients who have come up with almost 100 to 150 different names. And it's taken, in the worst case, about 7 to 8 weeks to register a company name, which again, this is an obstacle which can affect your business plan and ultimately also affect your timeline. So the minute that something like this occurs where you constantly get rejected with your company name, you've got to update your business plan in terms of your timelines. It's very, very important. So what do companies do? They either pick a very descriptive name, meaning, you know, what are they doing and so on, or they just do very simply a name by pronunciation, which is basically reproducing the name of the English name of the company. So not an easy task. Next slide. We generally recommend getting Chinese native speakers, and we also, for example, we have our staff helping as well in terms of coming up with names. You can also find a public relations firm to help you, a branding company to help you come up with all the various names. It's just, you know, I just want to emphasize here, it's not simple. This is actually one of the biggest obstacles in the incorporation stage of your China journey. One of the beauties is with the new foreign investment law, now everything is done initially online in terms of the application process, including the name approval. So what you can do is you can also create names, go online, do a preliminary view to see if there are any conflicts or if there are any issues with the name, so that you can kind of speed up the process in terms of how many names do you actually have to create in the process. Next slide. Now, here are a couple of things to avoid when creating the Chinese name. The first thing is obviously Arabic numerals, foreign symbols, alphabets, numbers, not permitted. So ABC is not permitted. 1, 2, 3, not permitted. You cannot use China, Chinese, national, state, or international within the name, within those first 2 to 4 characters at all. You also cannot use your country name, nor city names. So for example, you cannot use Cambridge. You cannot use United Kingdom, Great Britain. You cannot use Leeds, Manchester. If these names are within your English name, you need to basically completely remove them or ask somebody to create a similar pronunciation to it. But it cannot mean, you cannot use the actual words related to Great Britain or related to Manchester or Cambridge or Leeds or Bristol or anything like that. So any form of country name is not acceptable. Ultimately, to create a name that misleads consumers, hinders fair competition, creates damage or contradicts national unity or policies or social ethics or culture or even religion. Okay, so any of those connotations cannot be used. Here are 3 tips that you should think about when creating your name. The first is, how important is the Chinese name to you? Now, for example, for Woodburn, it's not important to me because my goal and my marketing strategy and my branding strategy is to use my name, Woodburn. So I randomly picked a Chinese name that was actually good luck. There was no bad connotation because I wanted my staff to like it. The only place the Chinese name will ever be seen will be on fapiaos, which are Chinese invoices. So it's important to know, what is your strategy? Do you need a Chinese name? Don't you need a Chinese name? And it's really critical to have this marketing strategy in place. Trademark versus Chinese company name is critical. You may have registered a trademark that's in Chinese and you want to use that name as your Chinese company name. These are 2 very separate applications, and it does not necessarily mean that you're guaranteed by having registered your trademark name that you will get it for your Chinese company name. So there are a lot of companies out there who've got a Chinese trademark, use that for marketing and branding purposes, and have a completely different Chinese company name that's then on Chinese contracts or is on Chinese invoices. You may want to get professional help to choose the appropriate name, right? Because you have to base it on image. Image is a critical factor on the Chinese market. So you may want to, talk to branding experts in the market about helping you to create this Chinese name. Next slide. These are the last slides, so kind of conclusion slides in terms of creating your business plan. Don't have to throw something together, in a couple of hours. Do your research and make sure you do take your time in terms of creating your business plan. Next slide. Be conservative. I think everyone is excited about going to the Chinese market. There's a lot of enthusiasm about getting there, and as a consequence, the enthusiasm might come out when you create your business plan and when you create your budget. Be conservative. You don't want to get disappointed when the results don't show. When in doubt, it's always good to leave a kind of a room for slack and wiggle room, particularly when it comes to timelines and budgets. So be conservative. Next slide. You want to monitor, evaluate, and reforecast your business plan. Don't put your business plan aside and put it in a drawer. You want to update it, amend it, which is why I find the easiest way of doing that is on a PowerPoint presentation where you have just bullet points. I also find that when you're trying to get investors or show teams, it's easier to portray it on a PowerPoint presentation. You should be monitoring it on a monthly basis, if not a weekly basis. particularly in your startup phase where so many things will pop up that will come up unexpectedly that you hadn't even thought about. Challenges do exist in the market. So, again, give yourself some wiggle room and create some sort of backup plans when establishing your business plan. Next slide, which is the final slide for today's presentation. I always love to think about keywords. And so I kind of wanted to summarize today's presentation with 4 keywords about creating your China business plan. The first is do your market research. Go on the ground in China, see it for yourself, explore the market, build a network, and this can be build a network of advisors, accountants, HR professionals, PR agents, branding agents, marketing experts. It can also just be build a network of, UK companies that are in completely different industries and sectors where you just want to understand what their experiences and journeys have been in the market. I think one of the beautiful things about the Chinese market is that most foreigners want to share their experiences because really it's been a roller coaster ride. Everyone has had their ups and downs, and everyone wants to share and talk about it. So go to networking events locally so that you can build this type of network where you hear from other people and other industry experts about, what not to do in the market or what you should be doing in the market. When you create your business plan, be conservative, be flexible. I think that's really critical, is have a flexible business plan that can be updated and amended on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. Create the business plan, monitor it, evaluate it, and reforecast it, and amend it. That is really important for the entire journey so that your vision is maintained, but you are foreseeing everything that's happening along your journey. So Zhao, that's the end of today's presentation.
Yes, thanks very much, Christina. Really helpful and useful tips. And also it's a very inspiring session for me as well. So I hope you all have found the presentation really helpful. Before we take questions, I would like to tell you a bit more about how Crayfish can help you with your business in China. In addition to the self-service marketplace that we are very proud of, we also offer tailored services for more complex projects. And in terms of the areas of our service offerings, it covers almost all areas that you want to do business with China, from market entry to IP protection, from translation to marketing, from HR to sourcing. Specifically, we can help you to set up in China by cooperating with companies like Woodburn, and also we can help you to get your Chinese name sorted as well. So let's see. Sorry, another slide about our upcoming webinars. The next webinar will still be with our lovely Christina. She's going to talk about how to choose the right registered office address for your Chinese office. In June, we will have another one focusing on e-commerce in China, delivered by Alibaba as well. So go online today and register yourself. We'll have more upcoming webinars that's presented there on our website. So in terms of questions, because of the limit of the time, we're going to only take the first 2. So Christina, the first one is, do the Chinese authorities have to see the business plan, or is it more for internal use?
It's actually only for internal use, which I hate to actually say because it might not inspire you to actually do it. I wish the Chinese government would take it, and in the past they did. One of the documents that was always had to be created was a feasibility plan, and in that it was basically your business plan, and you had to also include your budgeting for the company. So no, nothing needs to be submitted to the Chinese government. Creating the business plan is purely for you, for your internal use to convince your finance team, to convince the board of directors, to convince investors about establishing in the Chinese market.
Cool. Second question. And also the last question for today. You mentioned in the presentation to research our competitors' business scopes. How can we do this? What avenues are there? Can we get more information than just the business scope?
Yeah, so when you, so there is, in every city, the COC has their own platform and website where, and actually now there's even apps where you can type in the Chinese company name. As I mentioned, when you register your company, only the Chinese name is registered. So you need to find out the Chinese name of a company. You can type that in, and for a very small fee, or even in some cities, it's charge, you can then get all the information that is actually on the business license of your company. So that includes obviously the Chinese name of the company, the registered office address, which also means you need to know in which city they're registered because you have to go to that platform. The business scope, the registered capital and total investment, the shareholder, who is the legal representative, and I believe that's, and then obviously the business scope. So all of that information can be easily downloaded for you to research. Now, what this also basically means is that once your company is established in China, anybody can find that out about you. There's no way to hide this information. It is publicly available to everybody, but at least it allows you to know what your competitors are doing in the market, what type of investments have they been making, what's their business scope looking like. It's sort of a background or desktop benchmarking, if you will. You know, you might be going to the Chinese market and kind of figuring out ways how to benchmark your competitors. This is just a really simple desktop method that you can use to figure out, you know, a little bit about their backgrounds in China, when they've been established as well, and that type of thing.